Alright, I've done several mic checks, and, obviously I've checked the video too, and everything should be fine. If the audio is still messed up, and it shouldn't be, perhaps I'll correct that or something. I don't know. I probably won't. There's really nothing I can do about it, honestly. So anyway, philosophical rambling number 12, 10, 2, and then, yeah, just for you guys who can't do math on your fingers by now. So I'm going to do number 13 later today as well. And then I might do 14 tomorrow. I'm going to actually, philosophical rambling number 15 is going to be a very special one because it's going to be my last one that's based on my class. And we did something special for our last class, so I'm going to do something special for my video, which correlates with what we did. But for now, I'm going to do philosophical rambling 12 and 13 today. 14 and 15 are up in the air for when I do them. I'm moving to Grafton, New Hampshire tomorrow. And then I am going to, try to figure out stuff from there and see when I'm going to do what. So anyway, let's get started with this before I waste too much more time. So, and this is all from 4/12/11. So I'm only 18 days. So I'm like more than 2 weeks behind, but it's not a big deal. Because the next one is from 4/14, and then it shoots up to 4/21. So yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to discuss social contract theory, the state of nature, both the ethical and political concept, the racial contract, the non-civilized, whether non-civilized equals non-political, and talk about how Aristotle and Charles Mills talks about it, and conquering of non-whites by whites, which will basically be a history lesson showing institutionalized racism. So before I start, I want to preface this by saying I moved on from devoir. That was my last video, mainly on devoir, feminism, gender roles, and stuff like that. If anyone ever wants me to talk about them again, I will. So now I'm going to start talking about Charles Mills and the Racial Contract, which is a book that I recommend. It's pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect, and there's some things I disagree with, but I think for the most part it's a really good book and it really deserves to be read, especially by white people. Anyway, so the social contract theory, for those who don't know, noobs, for those who don't know what the social contract theory is, it basically states that people came from a state of nature, which is what I'll describe in a minute or so, and formed of their own voluntary will a society or a government to better their welfare, security, health, life, etc. So I mean, the social contract theory basically acts as a very, I don't know, the only way to describe it is it's a very ethical and political concept. And so on the ethical side of things, you see that people, or that it's said that people voluntarily made this sort of contract. The contract itself is sort of an agreement that we will live beyond just being hunters and gatherers. We will have a fully integrated society, or a society that's more advanced than our current one, etc., etc. But where did they come from? Where did this social contract originate from? It originated from, sorry, cleaning something off the screen. It originated from something called the state of nature, which, depending on the thinker, whether you look at Rousseau, who said that from the state of nature to being civilized, which is something I'll talk about in a minute or two. So basically, these all concepts kind of build on each other, which I didn't realize until now. But it's good. So it's good that it does that. Actually, I'm going to be talking the racial contract and then non-civilized. So, but they're still all pretty related. He talks about all these things in the book, so you can check it out and read the book. And yep. So anyway. State of nature is basically where people are, they're less organized and less civilized, than they are right now, and things might be more chaotic, or maybe things are less legislated. Laws are more natural, and they're less to do with lawmakers and legislators, and there's definitely pretty much no government, or no heavily institutionalized government in the way of the state of nature, or in the state of nature, I should say. So as an ethical concept, the state of nature is basically, I mean, it depends. Rousseau says that it's chaotic, and then it goes from chaotic violence and stuff to more peaceful civil actions. Instead, people like Hobbes would say, yeah, it's a brutish place, but people eventually develop their rationality through gradually and decide, well, this isn't working, so let's do something else, and that's where they get out of the state of nature, and that's also very political as well. People like Locke and Paine, who would make an awesome tag team, by the way, believe that the state of nature is actually a pretty good place, but or that it's not inherently bad, but it's not good enough for the needs of society. I think either Locke or Paine specifically believe in that. I'm not sure which. I haven't read them too much. I've actually yet to read Common Sense, which is something that's on my nearby book list. It's actually like right over there. Yeah, you can't see it obviously, but where I'm pointing to it on my bureau right here is where it is, and it's behind. I think it's like third on my list. Yeah. As far as that list is concerned, I still have a bag of stuff from the Porcupine Freedom Festival from last year. If you don't know what that is, go to porcfest.com, porcfest.com. Learn more about it. It's a great time. It'll be in the summer. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to get into that tangent, but free plug. So, how about that local sports team? Anyway, yeah, the state of nature then becomes a sort of place where the needs of society are being met, but not to the extent that they should be, basically. No matter what philosopher you look at, that's basically their thesis or their idea about it. Now, the racial contract, I think I briefly mentioned this, but the racial contract is the idea that the state or the political institutions and society that we have right now are built on white supremacy, institutional racism, and basically viewing non-whites as subhumans. Something like this. You can read the book, or you can look at the Wikipedia article if there is one for that, or the Amazon.com reviews or whatever, and see if I'm not right. I might be off because I'm thinking off the top of my head, so I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head. But basically the racial contract is sort of like the social contract in that it's decided by people, but instead the racial contract is made by whites against non-whites, and the non-whites basically have no say in the racial contract. So basically the racial contract is a social contract, it's just with more, well, race involved in the whole matter. I want to talk about something that has to do with the racial contract and the state of nature and everything else that I've talked about. Sorry about that, just adjusting myself. Excuse me. In Aristotle's Politics, he does talk about how being non-civilized equals non-political, or rather, being non-political means you're a god among men, or you're uncivilized, you're a brute. Now, it depends on what you mean by political. If you mean by political, you mean social, because sometimes people mistake social with political, which is why people confuse society with government. People say, well, that society is no good. Well, society is made up of individuals, not necessarily the government. The government has a big say in those individuals, but it's not just the government. And to just see the government and ignore things like the church, the business people, the individuals themselves, the customs, traditions, all that stuff that's going on is to miss the really bigger picture. So Aristotle is basically conflating social and political, I feel. But being a political animal means, being an animal of any sort means you're not human exactly, or you're driven by impulses, or not by reason but by impulses. Although not necessarily, I suppose. But I guess in this case, Aristotle is trying to say that the political is the social inherently. Now, I don't know. Is associating necessarily political? Not necessarily, I don't think. I associate with my friends and my family. That's not necessarily political. It can become political, but that's not the main purpose. So I don't see that. In our deepest relationships, my girlfriend and I, we're not political. We are political ourselves, but our relationship is not hinged on political stuff, and that's one of the deepest relationships I have in my life. It probably is the deepest. Anyway, Mills talks about this as a mistake too. He says that that the non-civilized, because the non-civilized or non-political, that means that gives the rights for white people to basically oppress non-whites on their land and say, well, no one's there, no one's using it like we use it, no, they don't believe in the same gods as we do, they don't have the same political system, etc., etc., so they can oppress them. Which brings me to my last point, conquering of non-whites by whites, which will basically be a quick little history lesson. So, I mean, let's look at back in history, obviously, for a history lesson. Duh. When we look at history, we want to look at people, how they act, and the context of their actions, and why they acted like they did, and could they have acted differently, and so on and so forth. I mean, one of the biggest examples, like, we can begin from the founding of the New World. I mean, even this concept that the New World was found and discovered is bogus, because Cortez and Columbus and Ferdinand didn't discover the new land. People were already living there. They just didn't know it. Or when they did know it, they didn't count it as discovered. And they only counted it as discovered because it's discovered to them. I mean, it wasn't really even the New World. It was about as old as everything else, but it was new for the whites, not the non-whites. And the non-whites were radically different than the whites. And, they were killed or they fought back. And eventually, when the Pilgrims got there, they started, contrary to the nice little story of, sorry, I have an itch. Contrary to the story of the Pilgrims and the Native Americans, how they got along, they really didn't. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of struggle. And the Thanksgiving, I mean, it was basically, I remember reading an article that was talking about how the Pilgrims actually, by and large, killed the natives and didn't really respect any of their rights or anything like that, or assuming rights exist, etc. It was actually funny. I mentioned rights not existing yesterday, which is not necessarily a viewpoint I hold. I was kind of saying it I was saying it half jokingly. And the girl next to me was a friend of mine. She's like, "What?" I don't know. It's so weird for people to think that rights don't really exist, except in so much as we need them. But I should talk about rights sometime. I should do that. But sorry, rambling tangent. I wanted to say it, but I was like, I'm gonna get on a tangent, and then I did. So. There you have it. Anyway, and then from there, I mean, natives were systematically killed. Their people were slaughtered. Their women were raped. Their villages were burned. I mean, it's not like they were the victims completely. They did attack. They broke treaties too, but not to the extent that the whites did. Especially once they started moving west towards Manifest Destiny, which was just the Trail of Tears. I mean, that's just like a systematic killing of thousands and thousands of people. The same thing for the internment camps for the Chinese. I mean, some people died from that. A lot of people got sick. A lot of people got injured. A lot of people lost their homes, their houses, their lives. The same thing has been happening to immigrants now, who are basically seen as subhumans. They're called aliens, for God's sakes. I mean, So I think a lot of the norms in society and institutions are based on racism, basically. And I'll elaborate on how that is in further videos, in the next two videos. So the next two videos will be on male 13 and 14. I'll do 13 today, and 14 will be sometime tomorrow, sometime next week, maybe Tuesday if I'm organized. But if I do not make videos for a while, I'll probably have like a sort of warning video on Sunday saying basically if I get tied up, I apologize, but I'm going to be going in a very new era, like a new part of my life, I suppose. So I don't know how I'm going to adjust to it, but hopefully I do it with flying colors. So I'll see you guys later though for 14, and like I said, 13 and 14 will be sometime next week, hopefully, but that remains to be seen. So see you in a few hours probably.